Neptune, the planet of intuition, fantasy, glamour, dreams and intuition, as well as fear, illusion, delusion, and confusion, entered its nearly 6 months retrograde journey on Tuesday, July 7th in Aries at 4 degrees and 25 minutes. At the very same time, it perfected that minor grand trine that's been slowly forming between Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, just a couple of weeks before Jupiter opposes Pluto to create that cradle formation that everyone's been talking about. On top of that, it sextiles on the day of the retrograde Mars, still in conjunction to Uranus, the awakener, liberator, and course corrector, and trines Jupiter in Leo, newly, wise teacher, the guru, and the creator of coherence and order. That all makes for an incredibly exciting and enlightening time when it comes to the revelation of truth, improvement in mental health, and clarity around our own self-sabotaging patterns. I'm here to explain what this nearly 6-month-long transit has in store for all of us and how to consciously engage with the archetypal symbolism present during Neptune's journey of reflection and review. That's what retrogrades are really for, that can make it truly a deeply healing time for each of us individually and collectively. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist. I've been doing that a couple of decades, and I'm also an astrologer making videos on concrete self-healing tools that align with the current astrological movements in the sky. So be sure and see all my free healing guides linked below, as well as my Chiron and Taurus healing kit and links to book with me in July. So what is really highlighted during this long Neptune retrograde are the revelation of secrets and illusions being revealed. Because remember that Pluto is still also retrograde in Aquarius, which puts the focus on seeing the truth behind groupthink, group agendas, and social lies, basically, that we tell ourselves and that we are being told. And this really highlights the deconstruction of false narratives that we were conditioned to believe were true. Neptune supports that. Or through psychological defense strategies that we had to believe were true. We had to believe an illusion or a delusion, Neptune, just in order to feel safe and like the world was a coherent place. That's the role of illusion and delusion. That is actually an adaptive and both maladaptive archetypal role that Neptune plays for us in our charts. So when Neptune appears to move retrograde, of course, all retrogrades are optical illusions by way of the Earth's movement next to the planet. Some of the more mysterious, incoherent, illusory elements of Neptune actually gain greater clarity because its attributes are seen in reverse. And what that means for us is that it's also really likely to be an excellent time for improvements generally in mental health, improvements in facing addictions and patterns of self-sabotage that involve escapism. That's Neptune, including, excess indulgence, abuse of substances that don't serve us, process addictions, things of that nature. Neptune stationing retrograde in this reflective reviewing place while it makes a sextile to Pluto and a sextile to Uranus allows that fog of war in Aries, including not just hopefully in the mundane outside world, to clear, but intrapsychically there can be a sudden kind of snapping out of it, or yes, even a spiritual awakening or a moment of enlightenment where we recognize what we're actually doing. Uranus is still in the conjunction with Mars and sextiling that Neptune stationing retrograde. With those things together, they absolutely provide the possibility of this awakening, because Neptune direct, which many astrologers consider a functional malefic in modern times, meaning that when we're under a Neptune transit by hard angle, a square, an opposition, or even a conjunction, it's very difficult to see clearly. Anyone who's had a Neptune opposing their sun, Neptune in their first house or their seventh house, especially if Saturn wasn't there. Right now it's a little different with Saturn and Neptune entering Aries together and having been conjunct. Saturn provides some clarity and some realism, but Neptune transits can make it incredibly hard to see. It can bring in illness. It can diffuse boundaries and allow viruses and pathogens and toxins, literal toxins, and even toxic dynamics and people into our lives because we don't see them clearly. We don't see the situation. We may be walking right into a landmine of toxins, literally and metaphorically, and we just can't see it clearly. And this is speaking as someone who's coming out of a 13, 14-year cycle of Neptune opposing my own sun, and now with the Neptune in the first house, I can tell you that the struggle to see people for who and what they really are, which I actually think is a strength of mine, has been obfuscated, to say the least. And so because, again, of that Neptune appearing to go backwards in the sky, effectively down on Earth mirrors a time when this fog of illusions lessens and that veil lifts so that we can really see what's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. And in Aries, this often will reveal to us the places in which we've lied to ourselves, because the initial trine to Jupiter in Leo with Neptune, the sign of the heart, that courageous heart, which we must summon to face hard truths. And we must summon that courageous heart to be with the grief that often comes up when we finally do see people, places, and things in our lives more clearly. That's there to bring an organization into our nervous systems. Truly, one of Jupiter's greatest gifts is coherence and order. That's why Jupiter is sometimes associated with the law and justice. So because of that minor grand trine at the time nation stations retrograde, there are probably many domains, like so many areas in our charts and our lives, that are getting highlighted at the time that Neptune goes retrograde, meaning that all those aspects of our life that are being highlighted, they're really supported by working with Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus. They're actively supporting the Neptune retrograde trining Jupiter. Jupiter is actively supporting and guiding us here to discover a different sense of self that is not simply the egoic mask or persona that we all have developed to function in the world, but rather our truest, most imaginative, that's Neptune, creative, associated with art, cinema, dreams, aspect of who we really are, with that Jupiter in Leo, the playful, creative, artistic, expressive essence of who we really are gets to come forward. And you probably know, if you watch my channel, I'm a dancer and an artist, and I was just talking to another dancer friend of mine who's equally passionate as I am about the fact that we are all born to dance. We're all born to sing, we're all born to drum, and we are all born to make art. And I've been studying West African dance for a long time, and the drum, the song, and the dance all go together in most African indigenous cultures. And this is just a good example of how Neptune might lead us to play, to express, to imagine, and create art from a place of courage and authenticity that we have not had before. Because everything that's happening with Neptune in its retrograde the stage was set by its conjunction with Saturn earlier in the year in Aries, which brings further clarity and actual wisdom and maturity, because Jupiter in Leo, the heart does not steer us in the wrong direction. If we could get still enough to listen, and we can block out some of that external noise that makes it so hard to hear the truth of our own inner voice and wisdom, that's Pluto, Uranus, Jupiter, Neptune all together. That is actually about the reclamation of personal power, spiritual awakening, and connection to the divine, Neptune. What's so extraordinary to me is that some of those important aspects that Neptune will make during its retrograde into, I think, December 12th, is an opposition to Venus on August 10th, where Venusian themes of harmony, beauty, women, relationships with women, sisters, mothers, friends, and the principle of beauty once again are highlighted areas that might have been unclear or obfuscated to us, maybe where we thought harmony and beauty existed, but it doesn't. This happens for a lot of us in spiritual communities, where maybe people wear white clothes and beads and are hitting sound bells and sound bowls and have cacao ceremonies, and where they have bindis on their heads. And I don't mean to make fun of this, but the whole thing looks very beautiful and artistic in a very Western white way on the outside. But sometimes the reality of the integrity of the relationship or the leader or the group dynamics is actually very much at odds with what deep down feels true for us. Something just feels off or not right or really performative. That can be Neptune. And remember that minor grand trine will still be with an orb and in effect at that time with Venus. And then just a week later, on August 17th, Mars will square Neptune, which might reflect war, unfortunately, out in the world and the glamour of war, kind of whatever that means. And Hollywood for sure glamorizes war. And the ways in which we wage a mental war within ourselves around patterns involving self-sabotage and escapism, those will all come there'll be a reckoning there. And then on September 12th, we have Mercury opposing Neptune. So the mind, what drives us, and the pleasure and beauty principle, all of those things are making hard aspects with Neptune. At its most reflective, clearest, closest, that's what's happening with retrograde. The planet is closest to the Earth at that time, right during eclipse season, with the total solar eclipse in Leo at 20 degrees 8 minutes on the 12th of August, and the partial lunar eclipse shortly thereafter in Pisces at 4 degrees 51 minutes on August 28th. So there will be massive clarity around all the areas of our life, relationships, our thinking, our behaviors, our decision making, the choices that because all those personal planets are involved. All those things we want moving forward, there will be very clear lines drawn in the sand by virtue of all those personal planets making either an opposition or square to Neptune right in the middle of eclipse season in August and early September. So that will bring in new and remove old relationships. Or maybe I should have said that in reverse, but you know what I'm saying. The places, dynamics, jobs that were essentially illusory, no longer serving us, not aligned with our highest truth. And of course, we're more likely to have that actually happen in our personal lives if those eclipses are within 3 degrees of personal planets or luminaries in our natal chart, or making squares, oppositions, or conjunctions to the personal planets or luminaries. But we'll all feel a real shift, and I believe a mass spiritual awakening that might feel jarring at first, because anytime we discover what is actually beneath the surface, and especially if people, places, institutions that we trusted, we realize actually have been a lie on some level, discovering that is extremely destabilizing. But that minor grand trine is essentially in effect for so long throughout this year and into next year. The presence of that minor grand trine shows us that there is essentially cosmic support, guidance, love, and divine presence. To me, that is such a reminder through all of this, whatever unfolds through the rest of 2026 and into 27, that we are always held, guided, loved, and protected. So if you are facing an addiction, or someone in your life has a pattern of self-undoing that you know now realize you need to confront, you need to walk away from, and intervention needs to be staged if that's appropriate, or there's just a hard truth you need to tell a partner or someone you love, could be a child, we will be supported that this is divinely timed, and the eclipses are just going to make that more clear. Because I always call eclipse season and eclipses Jesus take the wheel moments. Because when people ask me about fate versus free will, I will say, well, in the Hellenistic world, it's both. And a lot of life is letting destiny unfold and responding with as much grace as possible and moving forward. Saturn and Aries slowly, methodically, in the direction of the new dreams of Saturn and Neptune. Remember that conjunction at 0 Aries back in February of this year. Everything we're talking about right now is with that backdrop, dissolution of old dreams, old structures, and the creation of new ones. I always wanted to be a therapist. Well, I wanted to be a special ed teacher. Then I wanted to be a therapist. Well, way back then, I wanted to be an actor and a dancer. But, you know, the old dream is that I'm actually more of a spiritual counselor and astrologer. I love being a psychotherapist, but the new dream and the new truth, the old structure in my life is actually fading. And more of my days are filled with reading charts and offering spiritual counseling to people. That is Saturn Neptune in my first house. So this is your year too. If something is not working, Neptune retrograde absolutely will help reveal it. In Aries, with Saturn still there by co-presence, move us forward in a way that's actually reflecting emotional and spiritual maturity. That's the Jupiter trine to Neptune at the initial station of the retrograde. And that's what Saturn in Aries wants for us. You know, it's had this intimate exchange with Neptune at the beginning of the year that everything that Neptune retrograde helps us consider is essentially reflecting. It is a magical moment. And it's a hopeful moment. And it's actually a moment of really, truly seeing what dreams are true for us now and watching them unfold due to our hard work and commitment, Saturn. So your meditation for 6 months of a retrograde Neptune in Aries is, where have I been denying the dream that is true for me now? Really think on that. The mirror work, straight spine, deep breath, look into your left eye. I see a bigger dream unfolding than you have allowed before. And your mantra for the transit is, I allow the impossible to become possible in my life. No dream is too big, my friends. I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for liking, for subscribing. I love reading every single one of your comments. Please see my Chiron and Taurus healing kit on my website, linked below. Enjoy these 2 videos above me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.